Hello class, welcome back to the third part of selectors. But that selectors but work differently, and these ones we shall look at 4 of the most common types of these selectors. And for this lecture we are going to create another page, both HTML and CSS, since this includes both designing and also looking at the structure of how they are created. So we are going to look at pseudo class, then later we shall look at the pseudo elements and look at their differences. So we can come here and say pseudo maybe dash class. This is the .html. Once again, always be mindful of where you are saving these pages, because if you don't, then at the time of linking both pages you will lose out. You won't see it being able to link to the HTML page and the CSS. So HTMLs, go to HTML alone. So I save, then you can easily see it here joining its members. Then this one will be pseudo class dot css. So that should go to CSS folder, and you'll find other folders there, rather other similar types. You can maybe say body, background color, we can maybe call it gray. Even when you hover over here or bring your mouse over here, you can look at the different colors and color combinations. We can maybe choose to make it look like this, or maybe you can select a different color now and select what we call, so you can see it here, RGBA, where A represents alpha. In other words, this represents opacity. We shall look at opacity, the brightness of an image or a color. We shall look at it as a topic, opacity as a topic. So we know if you refresh the page we've just created here, nothing is going to take place because we haven't even finished creating the page. So we start creating the HTML page. By now you should be able to at least know how to create the HTML page structure from your head. You do not need to use the text editor to keep doing this. You know what follows each other or how they follow. Title could be pseudo class that begins with an E, pseudo class. We have our meta, and this is character set UTF-8. So we come to the body section of our document, and we can say H1, we call it pseudo class selectors, and then we can come here and read through the notes here. They are saying that pseudo classes are keywords that start with a colon. This will be the major difference between pseudo class and pseudo elements. And we are saying that these select elements based on their described state, e.g. being hovered over by the mouse pointer or being the first element of their type, among others. They are structured in a way that resembles classes, so they look like classes but are not classes in general. One of them is Hoover, is what we are going to begin with. We shall also look at the first child, we shall look at nth child, we shall look at other types of pseudo classes. There are those that will be for further reading in the interest of what we have to cover, and also what you need to discover as a person, because you also need to go out and read more on what these mean, such that once you keep finding out and answering those questions, you will be happy about what you can achieve and understand. So here we also need to link our CSS file. We had said that if the folder is inside the folder, it is a dot and // If it is outside the folder, then it is a double dot and a // But always the CSS folder will be always inside the folder that holds HTML files and encompasses all of them. So this is CSS, and we are looking at pseudo. That is not the right spelling. We are looking at pseudo class.css. So we can begin by saying, assuming we have our paragraph, there is another way of creating a class together with a div. We looked at what we call block level elements, and under block level elements in the introduction, we had what we call a div or division or divide. This is very helpful in creating different sections in HTML that can be designed entirely separately and effectively in CSS. So most of the time from now onwards, we are going to be encompassing our HTML tags and other things we are going to be designing in what we call a div tag. And usually we use a div tag and a class name, or a div tag and an ID name. So the most common is a class, since an ID is too specific. So we can say that the dot food, this is a new way. When you press enter, as long as you are using Visual Studio Code, it creates for you the div tag, both the opening and the closing and the class. The other way, if you still don't remember this, you can just start by saying div and pressing enter, then go backwards once, say class, and then say food. But I usually find that when I say dot food, since this is the dot food is the class name, so when I press enter, everything else is done for me. That saves my time. So I can say that so we are creating our class, and we are saying paragraph. We can say I like any type of food. Then maybe you can add up and say another paragraph here, that fried or not, I just eat, sometimes food is just food, so I just have to eat anyway. Now when we come to our browser, we can locate where we saved our documents, our files. This is the pseudo, the new one we are dealing with. Now we are expecting many things. We are expecting our heading, we are expecting our paragraph, we are expecting our expecting so the color is gray. As you can see, this was our heading, pseudo class selectors. These are our paragraphs. So we can see how to deal with the hover effect. For example, there are two ways I will show you. One is that you can come here and say that div hover is the hover is the pseudo class. They call it pseudo because something that resembles a class. That's what it means, pseudo class element, pseudo class selectors. So you can say that div and say color. That color is maybe white smoke. That maybe width is 700 pixels. That background is maybe let's say indigo. So when we refresh our page here, nothing is happening, but when we hover we can see the effect. Now by hovering we mean bringing the mouse over to, so over something. You can bring the mouse over to something and then you will have created a hover. So you are saying that when you hover over these words, over this div, then the things or the properties and property values, this is a CSS property, this is a property value, these that you have defined should now take effect. But the best way to achieve this is by changing this div into a dot class. We had a class called food, so we are now saying when you hover over a class. The difference here is that we can refresh, still we are getting the same thing. Now the difference is that if you have many div sections on your page, like you will always have them as many as you can count, because every time you want to design something differently, then it should definitely be having a class of its own or an ID of its own, and or what you would call a container of its own. And we use divs to help us achieve that. They work as containers of those sections, so we can work on those sections differently and well without worry. So if you had different divs, if you had, for example, the same thing here as a div, and maybe this class is now full, not food, if you still had a div here, we can, to separate them properly, we can add maybe HR here and BR, such that we know we are dealing with different sections. This is how it looks like. You can see both divs have the same things. Now what if you wanted to make the downer one to have different effects? If you only have div, then hover, you cannot achieve that. But if I said dot food, and then I copy this one here, down here I say the other one was a dot foo, make sure you have the right spelling, because without the right spelling this would not take function. There would be no effect because you are defining something that has no link to anything else. So dot foo hover, I can now change just the background to maybe brown. So when I refresh my page, now I can have these things, these separate divs worked on separately. So that is something important to note. Forget about, I know you will meet in some tutorials, you just use the div, hover, or some documents. Yes, you can, and it can work. But if you have more than one div on the same page and you want to work on it separately, you will definitely have to select using a class, not the whole div. So we can look at another example of a hover effect. We can come here. We shall use hover as a pseudo class more often than most likely any other type of a pseudo class element. So we can have a div with a class maybe dot. You can just you can say maybe dot fo, and then under here we have something like I am a tooltip. You usually see these in certain softwares and stuff like that, yet you can also create them here by the end of the day. Then you say paragraph, maybe to make someone laugh, you can say now you are smiling. So we have created a class called foo, and we are saying I am a tooltip. We are saying now you are smiling. Let's see how we can apply this then. We can come here and say dot fo as our class name. Under the fo, go to a paragraph. The paragraph that is there, we are saying display none. So before we go any further, we can refresh our page here, and this is what we see, both of these. Now when you come to CSS, we are saying display none. When we refresh, we can no longer see the paragraph because we have said do not display the paragraph. When you say display none, it means don't display the paragraph in this class. So this will not affect any other paragraph, just like you have seen the other paragraphs are still on the page. Okay, you can still see them, but this particular paragraph under this class, we are saying do not display it. We are saying color, maybe you want to say color, it is white smoke. We can say background is maybe green. We can maybe now add on font size. Font size, we can say 20 pixels. The default is usually 15 pixels, 16 pixels. So 20 pixels is the certain size, or these are working on strictly on a paragraph, not the tooltip. If you wanted to affect the tooltip, then since it is not in a paragraph, we can use the div function to affect it. Or still the class would affect this one here without anything else. So now we are going to say that the dot foo, when you hover on the class, okay, not the paragraph, because the paragraph is hidden. So we are saying when you hover over the class, then the paragraph. So this line means that you are selecting a class by saying .fo, the class name is fo. You are saying when hover on the class. When you hover on the class, what should happen? That's the question. You could stop here by hovering on the class, but we are saying when you hover on the class, what should happen to the paragraph? Because we're interested in the paragraph, not anything else. That when you hover over the class, then what should happen to the paragraph? The paragraph should now be displayed, and we are selecting one of the properties of display to block. We shall look at content, we shall look at other types of display as we go on. When we come to things like flexbox and box sizing, those are different ways of displaying. So we can say that the display block will refresh. Remember, when we come to HTML here, this paragraph and this line are both in the same class. That is something to note. Both are in the same class. So we are saying when you hover over the class, that is .fo, but we are interested in what should happen to the paragraph. So you come, you hover over the class like this. Now you can see that our tooltip is coming out. So we hid it. Now we are displaying it. We are saying when you hover over the class, display the paragraph. We shall look at this type of designing when we come to designing navigation bars, because this is the same concept we shall use, that when you hover over the main menu, then we should see different sub-menus popping up. So this is the same concept we shall use, and we shall look at them in different ways. Flexbox, we shall look at them being displayed normally, and other ways as we keep advancing with our CSS. So that is another way of using hovering over a class, over a div, over a paragraph. There are other ways, as we shall see in our future lessons. So I wanted us to look at another pseudo class type. One we can maybe say HR here, BR, and then we say H3. We can call this focus. One thing you need to know is that when you are dealing with pseudo classes, they always begin with a full colon, then the keyword. Hover was beginning with a full colon here, not a semicolon. So we are going to look at focus, what it means. Most people confuse focus with hovering, but the main difference is that when you say focus, you've either clicked on that element or that class or whichever someone is telling you to focus on, or you are even typing something inside, say a text box or an input line that you want this to be worked on. So we are going to look at the focus. We can look at an example. We can maybe say, you can call a class called focus.focus. Always name your class as relevant, such that even when somebody else can access your work, they can know what you are looking at. So we can say focus, and we say that input type is text, name is search. We shall look at this when we come to forms. So input search, the name and the ID can be the same and usually will be the same. Those are attributes. We have another attribute called placeholder, and we shall see what this means. Let me first leave it at that. When we can have another one called label. Label should have the same, the name of the label for what? For search. Either you've used only the ID or the name. So this should match the other. This should match either the ID or the name, because then when you are going to design it, you will pick any of these words and they will match the two. It will match the label together with its input. So the label, like we said, whatever you want to be displayed on the web page, if you are dealing with the tags that have both opening and closing, then in between is where you put whatever is going to be displayed. So now I want to put the word search here. We are trying to create a search bar. So when I refresh my page, here I have my search bar with input, and this is my title, focus. So this is the label, and it matters if we change it where this is and maybe put it on top here. Then when we refresh, we have our search starting. So note that. So what is placeholder? Placeholder, once you put the word placeholder, or rather the attribute placeholder, and put in a word maybe like search. This helps someone to understand. This is more specific, maybe bigger than the label here, because then this describes what that particular input box does. So when we refresh, you can see the word search inside there. And now when you click inside and you start typing, that placeholder name will get out. By default, it will get out, unless you are designing something else and you force it to stay there, as we shall see when we come to designing forms. So now we have the input, we have the search. We can look at how to affect this, for example, and we are not going to do much because there is a whole lecture about inserting icons. Here we would try to insert the search icon, but I find that a little bit, it's a bit hard for you to grasp that. So we can use the ID, since this is the only search button we have. We can pick the ID, and we said to select using ID. The difference between a class and an ID is that an ID begins with a hash, whereas a class begins with a dot. So we can say search. We can say that whatever you type in here, the font size should most likely be 20 pixels. We can give it a background. We say that the background should maybe be, say, let's have some funny colors. Tomato. We can say color to be, maybe you can say teal. If we don't see teal, we shall change the color. We can also limit the width. We can say that the width should maybe about 150 pixels. We can refresh to see where we are. So 150 pixels is here, and you can see that we have said that the background should be that, and then now the font size of the words, you can see before the word search was small, now it is big. So that is the color we have decided upon, but it is not very visible. So we can say change this color to maybe white smoke. So we refresh. So we are saying that whatever we type in here should be color white. So you can play around with them to understand or to change to whatever color you find easier to visualize. So that is, we can increase the size a little bit, but at least we are playing around with it. You can now easily tell the size, how to increase the width and the affect that. So we can say that now when you focus on this ID, okay, when you focus on this ID like this, the spelling is very, very important. If you want this to be picked properly, it is better you come here and copy the exact wording you used, then just paste it here. So we are going to say that the width should be 800, okay, we should be 500 pixels. Now what does this mean? This means that when you click in or start typing in our input, it should increase the size by itself. We need to add on that function of focus as a pseudo, that it should increase its width from 250 pixels to 500 pixels, meaning it should almost double its width or its length, if you want to use the other kind of English. So but we want it to be done in style, so we are going to add in another property called transition. We shall look at this when we come to animations. We are saying transition. What are you going to transition? You are going to work on the width. This width that we are putting here, we are working on the width, and they are saying in 1 second. It should take the time of around 1 second. How should it come out? Is in out. You can try all those 4 options you have seen to see what this means. Now we'll refresh our page. There is nothing we are seeing, but when you click here, it increases its size, literally doubles the original size. You click out, it comes back. You click in, it does that. Now that way you are seeing it. But what if you said 0.25? You reduce the time the transition takes. You can see it will take a shorter time to reach the maximum size. But the other typings and all other things, you can still affect all of that. You can maybe say now that the width is increased, you can say background should now change to maybe, okay, for purposes of just looking at what we are doing, we can maybe change it to violet, and maybe the color now should change to purple. So there would be, then this one would be, this and this particularly would be a bit useless here, since it can only now this one be affecting, it is only affecting this search. So when we click in here, you can see the background has changed, and when we start typing, now the words are in purple. So there are many things you can do as once you achieve this particular function. So that is pseudo class for you. We can you make sure you practice these two to understand them. Like I said, as long as you are reading this, we shall always have a class, a live class, where we can talk about what they mean, whatever you've gone through and is still challenging, we can always go through them. So we are going to say, can look at another one called first child. First child, this is HR BR. We are going to look at the first child. We can say H3, and then we call this first dash child. This is also another type of pseudo class, and we can now call this dot first dash child. So that is our class. We have a paragraph that is saying CSS rules. Maybe you can just write something small. You call say CSS is now vital to web development. So we can have 2 paragraphs of the same. Just to minimize on the time, we are only looking at the concept and the idea of what this means. So what does first child do? First child will always select the first child of that class. What do we mean by child? This paragraph is a child to that class. This paragraph is also a child of this class. But this second paragraph is not the first child of this class. So we expect that when we call the first child pseudo class function, it is going to highlight, or it is going to design or edit or work on this very first one. We can separate it by saying 1, then we have 2, such that we see what will happen. So when we refresh our page, we have that. As the CSS is now vital, we have 1 and 2. Then we can come here to CSS and say copy. So most of these you might sit down and say, when am I going to apply them? They are going to be very applicable when you start doing your projects, because you will have these notes at hand, you will have created these codes yourself. it is easy once you forget to revisit the code you did and simply pick this, paste it the other side in your project, edit it the best way possible, and you achieve the result. Right now you are working, what you are trying to do is to develop a bank of codes such that whenever you are saying I'm going to work on a table, which type of table do I want, how should it look like, how maybe you've forgotten something, then you can come back to your code and pick it, take it the other side. As you move ahead 3 years from now, you will be doing these things from your head because you will have understood them as long as you continue with web development. So we are saying that go to the class of first child and reach for the paragraph. Then the paragraph, the first child as a paragraph. This is what it means. The first child as a paragraph. What should happen to it? Maybe we can just work on something small. Font size could be 30 pixels. Okay. Okay. We can say color, maybe Rebecca purple. We refresh, and there we are. So we've just almost turned that into a heading of its own. It is not picking the second paragraph, yet both are paragraphs. That is what I want you to observe. Both are paragraphs. Here we are picking the paragraph. We are saying go to the class called first child, pick a paragraph, because we might have paragraphs, you might have h1, h2s, and other things, other tags, images, but we want to affect the first child of the paragraph, meaning we want to affect the first paragraph in that class. That's why we are calling it first child as a paragraph here. So that is a pseudo class of first child. We can look at our last example. There are many which are, as I've told you, but now we can look at our last example as what we call nth child. We want to look at nth child. That will be our last example. So those are 4 examples of pseudo class elements. Others, whenever we meet them, we shall also talk about them. The difference is how you select them. How do you select them? What do you use to select them? So we can say HR, BR, then we say that H3 we are going to use nth hash child. So we can say dot nth dash child as a class name. Then we say maybe h2, we can call this school items. Down here we say OR, preferably can say OR. Inside OR we have RI. We had done this under lists. RI we have P1 maybe. Then inside P1 we have a UR, and what is P1 having? Inside the UR we have an RI. Now this is what we call nested. We are mixing them up. We have ordered lists and unordered lists. All you have to understand is where this RI ends from. This will cover the whole of P1. So when we are going to look at, say, P2, P3, P4, we shall be making sure this is our last RI that covers P1 as the first element. or as the first LI. Then under, since these are school items, what is P1 required to take to school? Maybe that is what we are going to look at. P1, we need them to come with, say, pencils. We need also P1s maybe to come with rubber, since these are surely children. We want pencils and rubber, so we can just copy this where LI stops. We come here, we say LI, we change this to P2. P2 should also bring pencils, maybe, and pens. So where LI is stopping, this is covering P2. We can now go to another class, and this is P3. P3 should now come with pens and books. Okay, the P3s. We can have one more, that P4 in the requirements, that P4 should come with maybe pencils, yes, pencils and graph, pencils and graph paper. Things are starting to get mature. So when we refresh our page, this is what we see. See, we have P1, this is what you should achieve. We have P1, it has pencils, rubber. The dots are coming here because we are using UL and ordered lists. The 1, 2, 3, 4s are coming here because these are strictly under ordered lists. So that is nested. We have OL, you can see it covering the whole thing. And these are the main OLs. These are the main OLs, whereas these are the subsections, and they are covered with UL, or being determined by UL. So that is what you should see. Now we can come here, pick and write the name of the class. I write, I copy, I come to CSS here, and then I can say dot the class name, and I am saying nth child. So nth child is a pseudo class type of an element that allows us to input numbers that target those children. Then I told you each class, or those you see, are children. So we are saying that to the first child, what should happen? Make the color green. So to the first child, make the color green. See what happens to the first child. Make the color green. We can copy this and paste it here, and we are saying to the second child, make the color maybe, the second child, make the color hot pink. No, sorry. We are selecting a class, we go to that class, and in that class we are selecting the ordered list. That is what should be worked upon, not the whole class, assuming the whole class has certain things. So we are picking the OL. You can even add on LI here to be specific. OL, then pick the LI. To the first child, the color should be green. Now you can see all first children, the color is green. We need to work on that rubber and find out where it lies. So then we are saying we can now copy this, we can now copy that to paste it 3 more times. We are saying to the second child, select give the color as hot pink. To the third child here, so the third child, this is the fourth child. The third child, the color should be purple. The fourth child, the color should be blue. So we come here, refresh our page, and we have something like that. That is looking like an arrow, RRI, hot pink, that we are going to select the class, the OL, and then we also, under that OL, we target the LIs that are there. We say LI, and when we refresh our page, we are able to see, we said, if we bring it closer here, we said that to the first child and OR, give it a color green. So this is given color green because it is the first child and OR. The same applies to this. So it is speaking the LI, that it is the first child. So these are the first children of their class. Now when we come to the HTML here, this is the first, this is the second, and this is the first of here. This is the first, this is the second, the first, the second. That is why we see green and hot pink, green, hot pink, green, hot pink. When we come to the major OLs, we can also pick the third and the fourth, as you see. So these two are affecting both. Since we are putting LI, we are affecting both the OL and the UL at the same time, since we are giving it LI. So you could as well change, if you wanted, to give them a different color, but we are interested in understanding what this does. We are going to look at it maybe in another section, say tables. When we come to designing tables, we shall look at different examples, and we shall still use this pseudo class function. So take your time, try out that one. Now there are, in your assignment that you will get at the end, you will need to look at this. In your assignment, you will need to look at first line. What does it mean? Only child, invalid. What do they mean? So you will there is an assignment after these top selectors, and it will be targeting 1, what you have done, and 2, what these ones meant when you were reading through your research. Maybe we can look at one more example of pseudo class. We can use pseudo class together with the links. Let us see how we can achieve that. There is something to note here. We have a link. This is a link that is not yet clicked on. This is a link that has been visited. This is when you just hover over a link, bring your mouse over to that link, and this is a link that is active. So let us see what that means. We can come here and say HR BR. We say that maybe can say dot link as a class. Then we have maybe since we are creating links, we say http www.google.com. What is somebody going to see? Somebody is going to see this word Google. It is what we want the user to view. So we refresh our page here, and we should be able to see our link Google. So we can as well say that so we can add on maybe another one here, that you can say http www.ucu.sc sc.sc.ug. And what should somebody see? What should somebody see? Somebody should see UCU. We can have another one, that http www.skychords.com, and then we have something like sky chords. So when we refresh, we have the three. What are we going to do with them? We can say that we start and say that unvisited link, and then we say that a link, meaning now the word link is being used as a pseudo class. This is general, since it is the only link there, otherwise we would have selected using a class. So we can say that it should, if it is unvisited, then its color should be select blue. Okay. Then we say visited link, that say a, meaning the word visited is also a pseudo class. These are already defined. This and this and this are defined, so we are not changing them. We are not concocting them. They are there, just like we were using nth child or first child or hover or focus. So I think that the color, if it has been visited, then it should be C, green. Okay. Then we are saying, suppose you just want to hover over it. We are saying that when you hover, the color should be purple. When you hover, the color should be purple. Hovering effect. Then we are saying that if it is selected, okay, we are saying that if it is selected, then when we are going to use that, A, for selected we say active, that it is active. We shall look at this keyword active, pseudo class active, when we also come to navigation bars, because we can say that when a navigation bar is active, it should be highlighted like this, or the background color should be like this. We shall see that color, can say maybe salmon or tomato. So when we refresh our page, this will take into effect. You can see already through the designs we have been doing, sky chords has not been visited, it is writing. We can bring our colors here so that we see them properly. We are saying that if it is visited, it should write sea green. So these are links that I be using and they are already visited. So that is why they are writing immediately sea green. That is a good sign that whatever we said is okay. We also said that slate blue is the color if the link is unvisited. You can see sky chords is slate blue, and meaning it is unvisited. I've not clicked on this as a page such that it can load properly because the page itself doesn't exist. We can also see that when you hover over it, it should bring the purple color. You see it changing to purple. You could even add something here that may be background. Background should be which color matches. We shall see how that looks like. See, red. So now you can easily tell that you are hovering. So we can think of another active link online that maybe we can say, let's see whether this is a functional link, that http www.avast.com, and then if you've ever visited this link, it will still light green. So let us refresh. Now we can maybe add on something else such that it doesn't disturb our page. We can set target as an attribute underscore blank. So we said this is an attribute that forces this link to open in a new tab, not on the main page where the link was created. So we click on Avast. Yeah, we are not online. Click on Avast. Still waiting for internet such that I can reload the page. Still I do not have internet. We clicked on the Avast, and now that this page is open, we can come back here and you can see it writing green. Why? Because we said that if that link has been visited, the color should be sea green. It was red blue because it was not visited. Here it is only this that is still lighting that particular color red blue because it was not visited. You can see this domain is not yet active, and though it was visited, that is why it is writing green. So those are pseudo classes. The next tutorial will be about pseudo elements, and after that we shall look at combinators, and then quite a big assignment that you need to concentrate on in order for you to be able to achieve it properly, because you need to be reading to understand this. So thank you for now, and see you in the next tutorial for pseudo elements.